Well, greetings everybody and welcome back to the Bond Geek channel with me, your host, the name's Stevens, Henry Stevens. Everybody, how'd you do? Hope you're well, hope you're enjoying a good Bond film, a good Bond book, a good Bond video game, a good James Bond, whatever makes you part of this glorious fandom that is everybody, the James Bond community. Everybody welcome. And today we're going to be discussing another what if on the channel, another what if this happened in the Bond franchise, what if the history was changed, and we looked into it, everybody. And today's what if, everybody, is we're looking at what if Roger Moore was the original James Bond. Yes, everybody, what if we lived in a world where we never got Sean Connery or George Lazenby as James Bond, and we just all had Roger Moore to start off the franchise, everybody. We're going to look into that, all the different sides of it, all the different things we could talk about with it. We're going to discuss for you here, everybody, today on the channel, everybody. So I think before we start, everybody, I really should give my thoughts and opinions on Roger Moore just to start off with, everybody. Now, my thoughts on Roger Moore are very simple. I think he was an absolutely amazing James Bond. What I really loved about him playing James Bond is the fact that how he made it his own, and he really incorporated a lot of himself into it. And I think when you make a character your own, or your own version of it, it just succeeds and lives on forever as it did. And I loved with that injunction his quips. I love, keeping the British end up, sir. Let me try and open your vocabulary, or no sense going off half-cocked. All those great one-liners, everybody. They were fantastic, and we all loved them to bits, everybody. But that being said, I've got to be honest, Roger Moore isn't exactly one of my top, 3 favourite James Bonds. I think he was out for him. I really like the sort of harder, grittier, more, I think, slightly closer to Fleming James Bonds. But the one thing I will say, though, in again a bit of a defence of Roger Moore, like he needs his defence, is I think he was actually the most versatile actor to play James Bond. Honestly, just look through his tenure. Each film he did, all 7 films he did playing James Bond, he played slightly differently every time. And it's just, honestly, an absolute wonder to see how differently he played James Bond in For Eyes Only to, say, The Spy Who Loved Me, or how differently he played it from A Live and Let Die to A View to a Kill. It was, honestly, he was one of the most versatile actors ever to play James Bond, everybody. But how we're going to start off this what if, everybody, is this. Did you know that one of Ian Fleming's original choices to play James Bond on the big screen was Roger Moore? I feel like Roger Moore and David Niven were some of his original choices, and I'm sure they were, we know Roger Moore would be fantastic at James Bond, that goes without being said. But Ian Fleming really liked the idea of having Roger Moore playing James Bond, which I think is really, really cool. And I think the producers as well really like the idea of having Roger Moore as James Bond as well. So how are we going to start off this what if? Where is this sort of tangent in the timeline going to happen in Bond history? Well, this is how I've decided to start it. So let's imagine it's 1961. Howard R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman are trying to find an actor to play James Bond. Obviously, they are looking at people like Sean Connery or maybe Cary Grant or stuff like that. They're looking at who Ian Fleming really likes as well, which obviously comes up, Roger Moore. But then they've really got their eyes set on this man called Sean Connery, a bit of an unknown. However, Sean Connery has decided that, you know what, I don't want to do it. It's not for me, it's not what I want to do, it's not for me. So, the producers, Howard R. Broccoli and Harry Saltzman, decided we're going to go with Roger Moore to play James Bond. So from then on, at this tangent in the timeline, everybody, Roger Moore is going to be starring as James Bond 007 in Ian Fleming's Dr.No, everybody. So what massive changes happens to the franchise because of it? We'll dive into that. But I think one of the most interesting changes actually comes now how Bond is now changed back in the books. Because if those of you who don't know, as I say, Ian Fleming didn't like originally the idea of Sean Connery playing James Bond. I think he felt it was too much more of a thug, too well body built and everything. Ian Fleming loved Sean Connery's Bond in the end so much that he changes Bond's heritage in the book On Her Majesty's Secret Service to have actually a Scottish father. So it's because of Sean Connery, Bond is technically half Scottish, which is actually really cool when you think about it. Well, it's certainly cool for me, in my opinion. But that goes, Bond stays typically very, very good, but very much British, absolutely English gentleman's secret agent with the thuggish side to him. That is James Bond, so the Scottish side completely goes. And I think the other thing, honestly, to consider, everybody, is Roger Moore does not play Simon Templar in the Saint TV show because of it, because they started at the same time for the most part. Someone else would have had to have played Simon Templar in the Saint. we wouldn't have had Roger Moore, Simon Templar. And to be honest, I think that's slightly upsetting actually, because I don't know about you lot, everybody, but I have watched The Saint with Roger Moore, and I think it's a fantastic series. I love it. It's a really cool TV show, and Roger Moore gives, without a doubt, an absolutely amazing performance in it. So if you haven't seen it, I'd really recommend going to it. But let's go now here back to James Bond, because obviously Terrance Young is still going to be the director of Dr.No. And the question I wonder is, with Sean Connery, Terrance Young really took him under his wing and really shaped him and sort of took off the rough edges and made him the sort of suave, sophisticated James Bond. And my question is, what would he have done with Roger Moore? And to be honest, I think he would have tried to do exactly to a degree what he did with Sean Connery. Now, Roger Moore's already got the finery. He's got the sophistication with him. That's 100% guaranteed. Roger Moore's already got that. But I think what Terrance Young might have done is tried to make Roger Moore a bit more actually thuggish. I think he would have done the exact opposite of what he did to Sean. Make him a bit more of a sort of harder-edged man. And I think that's the direction they might have taken with Roger Moore. But hey, it's all speculation. We don't know, everybody. And obviously the films we made and the films would have come out. And how do I think Dr.No would have done? Well, I think Roger Moore in Dr.No would have been interesting. I think weird enough, I think in Dr.No and in From Russia with Love, he would have played James Bond very sort of similar to how he did Simon Templar. A bit more sort of harder edge, a bit more rude, a bit more aggressive than what we knew him as when he came to James Bond. How do I think the films would have done? Honestly, I think they would have done roughly about the same. I think they might have maybe made a little bit more money, because people already, I think by that point, sort of knew a bit of who Roger Moore was. So like, oh, it's a new film with Roger Moore, we'll definitely go see that maybe a bit more. I've got to be honest though, everybody, I don't think Dr.No From Russia Love would have been as good if it had Roger Moore in them. And I'll tell you why. I think the partnership between Terrance Young and Sean Connery really, really works for me. Those two just perfectly work off each other. And it's the same again in Thunderball. That's why I love Thunderball so much. Those two and the style and direction they both like naturally go together. I think Terrance Young and Roger Moore I don't think would have worked just as well. And I think there would have been a real sort of... clash is too much of a strong word, everybody, but I think there would have been like a sort of tonal, like, we're really still not sure where we're going with this series, everybody. But I still think they would have been successes. However, this is where I think things change a bit here when it comes to Goldfinger and Guy Hamilton. Now, as we know later down the line, Roger Moore worked with Guy Hamilton, and those two really did love working together. Guy Hamilton's style was to be a bit more sort of over the top, a bit more fantastical, and just really like put in a bit of like the silliness and go along for the ride. And I think that would have worked with Roger Moore incredibly well. And Goldfinger starring Roger Moore would have been, just like how it was, an absolute phenomenon. And I think people would have come out of it saying, this is now the Roger Moore James Bond, this is him on screen. And I think basically Roger Moore would have played Bond in Goldfinger the way he did in his own, as we know it, current tenure. And I think it would have been an absolute success. And I'm sure the producer would have gone, you know what, this now is properly working, this slightly over the topness, bit more tongue-in-cheek style of Roger Moore. From now on, we're going to go in this direction. And I think, again, that would be the thing going forward, everybody. Goldfinger, I think Goldfinger with Roger Moore, would have been that massive success and allowed him to sort of be James Bond a lot more the way he did. And I think the partnership between him and Guy Hamilton would have worked. So let's move on to Thunderball, everybody. I don't think in this universe Terrance Young would have come back to do it, nor would it have been Guy Hamilton. I think it would have been some other director of the time doing Thunderball, and I think Thunderball's tone and style would have changed dramatically if it did have Roger Moore. Because again, I think Thunderball for me was like the level of Goldfinger, but with Terrance Young's direction had that more slightly darker edge and that sort of more harsh, crisp side to it. I don't think that we would have got that if it was Roger Moore playing James Bond. I think it would have maybe gone, if possible, even more fantastical a bit. And then obviously, would have been as a big success as Goldfinger? Probably yes as well. I mean, we must keep in mind, everybody, Bond Mania was around and it was here to stay, everybody. That's why we're nearly talking about it nearly at the 60th anniversary, everybody. But I think Goldfinger would have been slightly the more bigger hit. I know Thunderball went on to be the biggest sort of like Bond film for ages, but I think Goldfinger still would have been the number one if Roger Moore was in Thunderball. And then obviously we come to You Only Live Twice, and I think that film would have been that much changed or different, everybody. Lewis Gilbert works well with Roger Moore, we know that from our own experience, and it would have been great. Now it comes to, and I know you're ready to talk about this film like me, Roger Moore in On Her Majesty's Secret Service. How would this one turned out? And honestly, everybody, I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service starring Roger Moore would have been a completely different ballpark, a completely different film than the one we got. I don't know if Peter Hunt would have directed it. I'll just say for the benefit of this, what if he does. I'm sure he works really well with Roger Moore, but I think On Her Majesty's Secret Service would have really had, as I say, a massive tonal direction. I think instead of being a bit more sort of closer to the books, they would have continued it going slightly over the top. The sort of level of humour would be exaggerated to the point. And obviously we still have the love story between Bond and Tracy. How do I think Roger Moore would have done in that love story? Honestly, I think he would have done okay. I think it would have been... Oh, that's a bit harsh. I think he would have been just as good as, say, George Lazenby was when it came to the love story. I just don't really know. I really just can't see in my head Roger Moore being so sort of doing the scenes where you can just literally succumb to love. Maybe I need to see him in some more different things. And I also think, I will say this, I think he would have nailed the ending where Tracy dies, and I think we would have had an epic performance there, everybody. But as I say, On Her Majesty's Service would have just been bigger and more explosive, more gadgety, more one-liners, more fantastical, I think, everybody. And then, a lot of people might wonder, well, would he stop there, everybody? And honestly, no, I don't think so. I think Roger Moore would have carried on playing James Bond, doing it in his style and his way, all the way to A View to a Kill. Why do I think that, everybody? Well, to be absolutely honest, Roger Moore, he kept coming back and back and back and back. I think it would have been a situation, everybody, where he would have played Bond right from the beginning all the way to the end of A View to a Kill. I really honestly do believe that, and we would have had, like, everyone saying, well, Roger Moore was the original James Bond, he was the best. He might have been the closest to the books, some people might say, but he was James Bond. I mean, the fact that he played, what, let's count it, Dr.No, From Russia with Love, Goldfinger, Thunderball, You Only Live Twice, On America's Secret Service, Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, Man with Golden Gun, Spy Who Loved Me, Moonraker, 4 Hours Only, Octopussy, and A View to a Kill. He played James Bond in 14 films. I mean, how could you compete with that? I mean, that would be, I think, one of the most biggest shadows in the whole of history. But for the argument's sake, let's just say that Roger Moore decided to leave, maybe should we say like Sean Connery did, at the end of either You Only Live Twice or Diamonds Are Forever. If that happened, honestly, everybody, your guess is as good as mine who they've got as a replacement James Bond. I have absolutely no idea. We might have got John Gavin. You never know. You just don't know. The list of potential actors who could replace Roger Moore, either in For Her Majesty's or, you know, at the end of Diamonds Are Forever, is completely endless. But I think he would have really much stayed with James Bond. And I think the series, honestly, would have... The next question I really want to ask when it comes to Roger Moore is, would the series have lasted that long with Roger Moore playing James Bond? And honestly, yes, I really do. I think a lot of people say to me, well, Henry, it was the Sean Connery style, the sort of hard-edged style, that was really great, and then moved into the slightly more light-hearted, then to go back to serious is one of the reasons it stayed ability to change. And Roger Moore style is just the same all the way through, potentially 14 films. As I mentioned earlier in my comments here, Roger Moore could play James Bond so differently, and he did play it so differently every time he played James Bond, everybody. So I don't think that would have been really an issue about it. I think the popularity of James Bond would have carried on. It's like, you know, it's just bog standard. Who is James Bond? It's Roger Moore. Roger Moore is James Bond. You know, the fact that he did it for 14 films, basically did the whole of the Ian Fleming's books to a certain degree at one point. Obviously minus Casino Royale, everybody. You know, going that, a couple of things I would say. I wonder as well, just looking at the opposite end of that, would have been the perception of Bond being like too far away from the source material? Would be people comparing the sort of James Bond style, like James Bond is sort of sent up for last, a bit like how I really connect this a lot to like 60s Batman. Now I love the Adam West Batman. Adam West Batman is awesome, but you know, it is a bit of a different, shall we say, tonal shift to what normal Batman is. And I think it would have been the same with Roger Moore as James Bond going all the way through. you know, let's just say Timothy Dalton did be his replacement afterwards, everybody. You know, it would have been such a total shift. People going, no, I want, you know, my light-hearted funness. And you're like, well, that isn't actually James Bond. If you look at the books, it's actually quite a lot darker. Yeah, but Roger Moore did it this way, and Roger Moore did it that way, and all that stuff. I think it would have been much harder for anyone, a bit like how it was with George Lazenby, to follow the original James Bond and actually go something totally, completely different. It would have been a very difficult thing to do, everybody. And here's another thing I think to discuss, actually, everybody. The Battle of the Bonds. Yes, Never Say Never Again versus Octopussy. The thing of the matter is, I still think Kevin McClory would have remade Thunderball, obviously with Never Say Never Again. Who would have played opposite Roger Moore as James Bond? Because of this situation, Sean Connery wouldn't have. You know, might it have been James Brolin. You know, he was at one point considered, if Roger Moore wasn't going to come back for Octopussy, maybe it was James Brolin versus Roger Moore, Never Say Never Again versus Octopussy. At that point, it's the same history as we have now, but a clear winner with Octopussy. But this is by a mile. This is by like country miles. It would have been better. So everybody, that's really my thoughts about what if Roger Moore was the original James Bond. I think it would have been a very interesting way to go about it. I think Roger Moore would have done so many different variety with the character. It would have really sort of worked. I think some of the films wouldn't have been as good as what they have been. We have now, like On Her Majesty's Secret Service, maybe like the first two, Dr.No and Rush of Love. But Roger Moore would have cemented James Bond as a action superhero. This one guy who started in the 60s all the way to the sort of mid 80s. It would have been a great sort of sense of stability. It would have been amazing, and we probably would have finished off and then next go into Timothy Dalton and so on, everybody. But I want to know your thoughts, everybody. Do you think that Roger Moore as the original Bond film, would the series have lasted? Would it have been as good? How different would it be? I want to know, everybody. Comment down below and tell me your thoughts about it. As always, everybody, my name's Henry Stevens. I am the Bond Geek. Goodbye.